Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And in this episode of God Talk, I just want to give a disclaimer from the very beginning. If you are perfect, there's no reason for you to listen to this episode. Just turn it off. Next week will probably be much more relevant to you. But if you are perfect, you do not need to listen to this episode. Now, I would think for the vast majority of us, we should still be listening. In fact, we should all still be listening. But I do understand that some of you think that you are perfect. And so if you're living in that delusion, then yeah, just for this week, turn it off, come back, see what we have next week, and maybe it'll be a little bit more relevant for you. But if you realize that you're not perfect, then I think this could be a helpful podcast for you, because we're going to talk about how we make the most of our mistakes. Listen, everyone's going to make mistakes. The question is how do you handle those mistakes? How do you deal with them? I think there's as I was thinking about this, and there's a reason why I'm doing a podcast on this week, and I'll get to that in just a little bit, but I think there's 4 different kinds of people in terms of how they handle mistakes. The first is, and these ones are already not listening, so we'll just talk about them, but there are those who don't think that they make mistakes. These are the people who, they also won't say that they're sorry. And I have to tell you, I don't really understand people like this. And I've met a number of people like this that they can't acknowledge that they make mistakes. And I think what it is, and maybe you work for someone like this that can't ever make a mistake and can't acknowledge a mistake. Maybe you're like this, but probably not, because you won't be listening still at this point. If you are, maybe you're married to someone like this. But I think in the end, people who can't acknowledge that they make mistakes, people who can't say that they're sorry, it's because their self-esteem is so low that to acknowledge that they're less than perfect, just they would feel so bad about themselves, they can't deal with it. So they sit there and live in this false reality that, somehow that they're perfect and they don't make mistakes. Yeah, I have to be honest, I was a little bit that way in my younger years. I would say up to my college years, maybe through my college years, it's not that I would ever say that I didn't make mistakes, but it would be rare. And if I did something stupid, if I did make a mistake, I would try to figure out how to spin it so that it made sense and it didn't look like a mistake. And I think because I just felt foolish that I would make a mistake. I felt foolish that I'd be less than perfect. I felt like I wasn't allowed to be anything short of perfect. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know where I got that from, but I would expend a lot of energy trying to justify even the boneheaded and stupid things that I did, so that somehow that would make sense to people. And then after my college years, I learned the power of saying, you know what? I screwed up. You know what? I'm sorry. Because rather than expending all of that energy trying to make yourself look perfect when you're not, I found out it's a whole lot easier to just say, you know what? I screwed up. I messed up. Because once I say that, now what are you going to say? You want to keep yelling at me about it? Well, I just said I messed up. I mean, what more do you want me to do? And also, I began to appreciate the power of saying, yeah, you're right. My bad. I'm sorry. Because it takes the air out of the other person's balloon. They can't do anything about it. What else do you want me to do? I can't go back and fix it. So there are those people who don't want to admit that they make mistakes. But the truth is, we all make mistakes. Then the next type of people that went in terms of mistakes, the next category are those who like to repeat their mistakes. And I have to tell you, this is probably the most frustrating group to me. The people that think that either they don't care, but I don't know that it's that they don't care. These people, they keep doing it over and over again and think somehow it's going to work different next time. I'm here to tell you, if you touch fire, you're going to get burnt every single time you touch fire. It's not 50% of the time you're going to get burnt when you touch fire and 50% you won't. If you breathe when you're swimming underwater, you're going to start choking and gasping, and well, frankly, you're going to drown if you don't get above water once you breathe in some. It's not like that 50% of the time, or 65% of the time, or 87% of the time. Every time you breathe underwater, it's going to happen. Well, a lot of us are living lives of dysfunction, filled with all kinds of mistakes and the decisions we make and the people we hang out with and the things that we do. And we can't figure out why our life is so miserable. One of my best phrases that I like repeating is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. No, if you're making mistakes and if you're doing stupid things, you need to learn from them and stop repeating them, because as long as you repeat them, you're not going to get a different result. The third type of person when it comes to mistakes are those who never get past them. You make a mistake in your life. You did something stupid in terms of raising your kids, and your kids turned out bad, or maybe they don't talk to you, and you just can't ever move past it. You choose the wrong person to marry and it doesn't turn out well, and that blows up on you, and you're just carrying around all the bitterness, grief, and anger as a result of it. You said something stupid to your spouse, and they left you, and you can't ever move on past that. You falsified a document at work and you got fired, and like that somehow has defined you. There's that group of people that they're always looking back, and they're always beating themselves up for the stuff that they've done in the past and the mistakes that they've made. And it's not healthy and it's not good. And each of these aren't healthy and good. So whether you don't think you make mistakes, that's not healthy and not good. You keep repeating them, that's not healthy and good. The only really good way to handle mistakes is that you don't waste a good mistake. I mean, we're all going to make them, but when I say you don't waste a good mistake, that means you've got to learn from the mistake. Otherwise, you're not making good use of it. We're going to make those mistakes, but what we need to do is we need to learn from them. Because, if you're not growing in your life, you're stagnating. And I think a lot of us maybe are stagnating because we don't think that we can learn to do things a better way. Well, we can, and especially when it comes to our mistakes. So the reason I'm sharing this podcast is I had a relevant situation happen to me just yesterday, and when I was a vicar, when I was doing my internship to be a pastor, I remember being at this church and assigned to this church. It was in Washington State, and someone came in asking for help, and I asked the senior pastor if the church offered help to the homeless and to the people that come by the church looking for help. And he was very adamant, no, the church does not. And I always made it a point from that point on that I would never be one of those pastors that was so bitter that I would never give opportunity to help someone who's coming by the church looking for help. Of course, we help our members as long as we're doing it in a healthy way, but it was never going to be just like a straight out, no, if you're coming to the church off the street, we're not going to help you. Because I think in terms of God and the Bible, I mean, we're supposed to help those who are down on their luck. But I also believe, Jesus says, if you don't work, neither shall you eat. And I don't think it's good to enable very toxic and unhealthy behavior. So I kind of came up with a way that I handle homeless people and people who come by the church that aren't homeless, that are just looking for handouts. And that is, first of all, I usually kind of grill them on, where's our home church? Why aren't you asking your home church and your home pastor to help you? But then even beyond that, the real simple thing for me is this: I'm not going to give you a handout, but if you're willing to work for a couple hours, I'll give you some gift cards to the grocery store. And usually the standard thing that I'll say is, listen, you do some work around here for a couple hours, and I'll give you $50, $60 worth of gift cards to go to the grocery store. Well, one, I'm just not going to hand out cash and enable dysfunctional behavior, in which people probably use that for drugs and who knows what else. But even though I say $50 or $60, if someone actually works. And probably in like 25, 26 years of being a pastor, I've probably only had two or three people who have actually, and I'm probably not being accurate on that, less than 10. In 25, 26 years of being pastor, maybe 7 or 8 people who've actually done work. And honestly, I've probably had like 3 in the last year or two. It definitely more in the last year or two, because in the end, they're just looking for a handout and they don't want to work. But if they actually work, I won't give them the 50 or 60 I promised them. I'll give them more like 80 or maybe even $100 worth of gift cards, because listen, I want to help people, but I want to first know that they're willing to do something for it. And the vast majority are like, yeah, let me go out to my car. I just need to do this or that. I'll be right back. And then, they never come back. And so that's just how I've learned to process that, to weed out those who are really worthy of being helped, and those who are just trying to scam the system, be lazy, and just not enabling unhealthy behavior. Well, yesterday I had this first guy come in. He was dressed actually fairly decent. And he just said, I'm just going to churches looking for help. And I offered him, if you're willing to, I said, work for a couple hours, then I'll give you some grocery gift cards. I said, I know it's a little hot right now. If you'd rather come back in the morning, that would be fine. He said he needed to go out to his car, check with his wife. Then he came back to get more information on what I meant by grocery gift cards. And I told him, and he said, well, let me go talk to her again. And I didn't see him again. Well, a little later in the day, this other homeless guy comes in, and this guy's much more rough. He's got like a backpack, and he is dirty. He smells. And I don't initially talk to him as he comes in, because I'm on the other side of the facility, the far end of the foyer. I saw him come in, but I saw my secretary talking to him. But by the time I got up to where that conversation was, I noticed he was being pretty aggressive verbally with my secretary, and I didn't like that. And being aggressive, like basically demanding things and talking bad about the fact that like we weren't giving it to him, and we're supposed to be a church, and just like he's entitled to all this stuff. So I took over the conversation, and I took it over a little aggressively, because I didn't like him talking to her that way. And needless to say, I wasn't having a conversation very long with him. And this is what set me off. He said, I wish I could just talk to God, because basically talking to people like you guys, this is supposed to be a church, and just being very angry and hostile. And so it set me off. And I'm just going to be completely honest. If I have a trigger, it's disrespect. I can't keep my mouth shut if I hear someone else being disrespected. I will always come to their defense. And frankly, I don't like to be disrespected myself. And so between him disrespecting my secretary and then disrespecting me, I gave him a packet with water, some beef jerky, granola bars, homeless packets that we have on site. And basically I told him he needed to leave. Oh, he did not like that. And so he got even more aggressive with me. And then I got more aggressive back with him, because that's just in general, I guess how I've learned to deal with aggressive people is like, if you think you're going to be crazy, I can be just as crazy. In fact, I'll be more crazy. If you're going to get aggressive, I can get every bit as aggressive back. And needless to say, it wasn't working out real well with this guy. And so my secretary went and she got our new worship guy, Jonathan. And Jonathan's not a small guy. He's probably like 6'2". He was actually a police officer for like 5 years or so up in the Northwest. And Jonathan comes in and immediately takes over the conversation and puts his arm on the guy's shoulder. He kind of starts de-escalating it and takes him outside. And for the next hour and a half, he's sitting on the bench talking to this guy. And I'm just watching kind of with my mouth dropped, like, the guy's wiping away tears, and Jonathan's just sitting there like totally de-escalating this guy. I bought him a soda, ended up taking him to the bus station, got him on a bus. I think made a call or two to homeless shelters to find out who were accepting people, got him on a bus, paid for the bus fare, and sent him down there. And I was ready to knock this guy out. I was ready to like physically pick him up and throw him out of the building, because he was just being so entitled and rude. And I also could pick up he had mental illness. Like I saw that. Like I knew it was mental illness. I wasn't sure that if there's evil along with that, and I still think there was. And so I didn't know if he had a knife. I didn't know if he had a gun, but I just kind of went into protector mode of the my secretary of everyone that was up here and so forth. The preschool wasn't going on yesterday, but I saw like that Jonathan's approach was way better than mine. Like, even though I've never had one of these conversations go south with a homeless person before, and listen, I've had many of them. After church on a Sunday, there was a guy that had a hammock out on our property, and I went up to him, and I saw like a big 6-inch knife next to him, and I went over and I talked to him, and it was a fine conversation. I've never had a bad conversation, even when someone was armed, but it was not going well with this guy, and I've kind of been beating myself up about it for the last 24 hours, thinking, man, I should have handled it differently. In fact, our janitor, Felipe, he saw some of it. He's like, I've never seen you respond that way before. And I said, listen, I said, he seemed evil. He was very entitled. He was very aggressive. And that's one of my triggers, is when someone is disrespectful, and he was disrespectful to Tammy, and then he was also disrespectful to me. So I kind of felt bad like that even Felipe saw me that way, but not completely, because that's just me. I don't like when other people disrespect other people. And I've told stories before. I can be in like a restaurant, and if someone's disrespecting the waitress and I'm overhearing it, I will have to open my big mouth and come to that person's defense, because I just can't stand people being disrespected. But what I did learn is I could have handled that situation a better way. Jonathan was gracious enough. He's like, listen, I've been trained in this, because he was a police officer. He's like, I've dealt with a lot of homeless with mental illness, and I just know how to do it better than you. Fair enough. I mean, he does, and he has been trained in it, and he did an awesome job. And so what I took from that is like, I handled that not the best way. I made a mistake, and I certainly could have handled it a better way. And it will be my goal that the next time we have a homeless person that's mentally ill, I will deal with it differently. If it starts escalating, I will learn to de-escalate that and try to set him at ease, or the person at ease, rather than amp them up. We're all going to make mistakes. The question is what are you going to do with them? And can you learn from your mistakes? Because for me to get into that situation again next time, like, it would be wrong for me to handle it the same way. I need to handle that situation better. I need to learn from that mistake. But that's okay, because I'm not going to be perfect at everything. And I don't ever claim to be. In fact, when I look at the Bible, I see a lot of people who make mistakes all the time. And hopefully they learn from their mistakes. I think of Peter, right? Peter's the one that denied Jesus, 3 times before Jesus died. That was a pretty significant mistake. But he learned from it, because by the time Peter dies, he's dying because he won't deny Jesus. He learned from his mistakes. But even though he learned from his mistakes, that didn't mean that he didn't make other mistakes. Right? Because, right, like I made this mistake in how I handled this guy yesterday. I can learn from that, right? And I should learn from that. And I'll handle it better next time. But you know what? 6 months from now, well, actually probably tomorrow, I'll make a mistake. I'll make a mistake about something else. And so Peter learned from his mistakes with Jesus. He denied Jesus when Jesus was arrested, and they accused him of being a follower. But he learned from that, and he was faithful, even to the point of losing his life, because he wouldn't deny being a follower. But in between there, like, Peter and Paul get into it, because Peter's making the Gentiles basically become circumcised and become Jews when that was never required of them. And he wasn't, like, when people were watching, he wouldn't hang out with the Gentiles. And that really upset Paul, and rightfully so. So even though Peter learned from his mistakes, he still made other mistakes. Even though you hopefully will learn from your mistakes, and I'll learn from mine, that doesn't mean that we won't make other mistakes, because we will. I think of other people in the Bible. You've got Samson, right? He had a little woman issue where he liked women a little too much, and that got him in a lot of trouble, and he ended up being captured by the Philistines, had his eyes gouged out, but he learned from that mistake, and in the end, God gave him his strength back, and he was faithful to the point that where he lost his own life as he was battling the Philistines by knocking down the arena that they were making a spectacle of him in. Paul learned from his mistakes. He was persecuting the Christians, but then Jesus came and let him know that he was making some mistakes, and he learned from it. David learned from his mistakes. The Psalms are all about him just lamenting over the mistakes that he was making. He made many of them. He made mistakes as a father. He made mistakes as a husband. He certainly made a mistake by taking another man's wife to be his own, and he never did that again. So he learns from his mistakes, but he continues to make mistakes. Moses, he struck a rock when he wasn't supposed to get water from it, and he learned from his mistakes and never did that again. But certainly did other things that were mistakes as well. Listen, none of us like making mistakes. And as you listen to this podcast, you probably have made some mistakes in your past that you're still kicking yourself for. You got to stop kicking yourself for your past mistakes. I mean, don't sit in it too long. Don't dwell in it too long. Stop looking back. Start looking forward, but just learn from them. For goodness sakes, learn from them. Stop repeating them. Stop denying that you make them. Stop beating yourself up for them, but just learn from them and move on. Because in the end, we have a God who's forgiven us, right? I mean, we have a God who wants us to become better followers of him every day that we have breath in our lungs, but he forgives us for our past. And if he forgives us for our past, then we ought to forgive ourselves as well. Well, I appreciate you learning or listening to this episode of God Talk with me, at least for all of you who acknowledge that you do have mistakes. And I hope this encourages you the next time that you do make a mistake. And I hope it encourages those of you who are currently beating themselves up for the mistakes that you've made recently. God bless, and I'll talk to you next time.